Okay, today we're pleased to have Erik Rose, Director of Workforce Information and Initiatives, Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education in Montana, joining us. Hi, Erik.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great.
Thanks for joining us. And Erik will share about the more of the background and successful policies implemented in Montana, because in Illinois, our statewide PLA policy was just in effect since this past new year of 2018. So we will see what Montana is doing, what made their policy so successful, and start from there.
Yeah, so a little bit of background about the Montana University system. We are a single system state. So inside our system, we have everything from doctoral universities all the way down into two-year colleges, as well as 4 co-located two-year colleges, so two-year colleges that are embedded within universities. We are governed by a small board of regents, a 7-member board that is constitutionally separate from our legislature, which is fairly unique in that our legislature is only responsible for funding our university system and not making and adopting policies and procedures. That all runs through our Board of Regents. I work at the Office of the Commissioner, and the Commissioner is the administrative arm of that governing Board of Regents. So within our system, we have 2 flagship universities, the University of Montana and Montana State University. Those are both doctoral research institutions. And then our system is really developed underneath those 2 different umbrellas. So each flagship has a sphere with subsidiary campuses underneath of it. And so in total, we have about 16 units of higher education within our system, and that includes 3 standalone community colleges that don't fall under our board, or that don't fall under our commissioner's office, but do fall under our board, and they also have local governing boards. So we have a lot of moving pieces, and in order to get anything done in our system, we found out that really the secret sauce is having initiatives be faculty-led and administratively supported. So with prior learning assessment, it was no different. Really, this work started around 2013. Looking at the number of adults in our state, we have roughly the same amount of adults with some college and no degree as we do with a post-secondary credential, as well as an extremely high number of veterans. About 10% of Montana's adult population has served in the armed forces. So we knew prior learning assessment was a huge opportunity for our system and something that we really needed to look at hard in order to have a successful not only university system, but as well as moving the state forward with workforce development, with future labor challenges, as well as credit accumulation and post-secondary credentialing. So in 2013, we started to look at prior learning assessment policy and what that could mean. We had some private grant funding, and we relied heavily on the experts at CALE to provide training as well as technical assistance. So with that initial grant money, we held several training sessions, both faculty assessor trainings as well as advising trainings for prior learning assessment. And through that, there was a research component of looking at other states' best practices. We formed a really faculty-led prior learning assessment policy council, and that council was about 20 members. Roughly half were faculty, with about 5 or so administrators, and then 5 or so staff with support from the Commissioner's office to facilitate and host those meetings. So that PLA Council met alongside of this grant work to train PLA assessors. And with that council, really there's a lot of, I guess, difficult discussions. There was members of that council who are against prior learning assessment. They were put on there by their faculty senate in order to shoot down prior learning assessment. So the faculty atmosphere in the state wasn't bright and cheery all across the board. There's a lot of skepticism, a little bit of fear of what prior learning assessment could do to classes, and really a lot of myths that needed to be unveiled. So that council met on and off for about 2 years and developed a pretty robust policy. And throughout that time, there's a lot of different heads that were turned. I think having grant funds to host trainings and technical assistance, that really helped mitigate some of those fears, really helped our faculty warm up to the idea of prior learning assessment, that we wouldn't be handing out credits to students en masse, just giving them away. That really this was faculty recognizing students' work, student experience for credit in lieu of sitting into their class. So students were still earning the credit, it was just on a different timeline. So our policy that was developed, again, that group met for 2 years. We adopted a PLA policy in September of 2015, and the policy wasn't perfect, but that policy was adopted by our Board of Regents and signed off on by the faculty senates, as well as our 2 flagship universities. And then with that PLA policy, we had kind of this structure in place, but really low utilization and no way to measure the utilization. All of our institutions run Banner, as I'm sure institutions in Illinois use as well, and we didn't have any coding mechanism in Banner for prior learning assessment. So that was one of my I guess functions of the office. Was I created a crosswalk of all prior learning assessment opportunities, as well as a crosswalk for the different veteran codes, because we knew that in measuring prior learning assessment, one population that we really needed to capture was veterans. How are veterans utilizing prior learning assessment? And so that happened slightly after our policy was adopted. And we started to see different pockets of success with prior learning assessment, but really low utilization across the board. And to this day, we still haven't scaled up prior learning assessment, but we've gone through a couple different avenues to try to scale that up. We worked with a firm called Academy One, and they built an online platform for portfolio assessment. At the time, portfolio assessment, we had some external funding to try to increase the amount of students who were receiving portfolio assessment. And that Academy One platform, we didn't see the utilization that we would have hoped out of it, but we did see a lot of campuses really starting to pilot prior learning assessment opportunities. And so it wasn't, it was intended to really increase the number of portfolio assessments, and we didn't see that, but it really was a catalyst for other prior learning assessment work. And so within our policy, we have a couple different educational principles. And as we scale up and look at piloting different forms of PLA in the state, we want to really keep true to that list of educational principles. And the first is that learning occurs within formal education, and it really takes some motivation, some initiative from the individual learner. So we kind of were recognizing in policy that there's learning that can occur, college level learning that can occur outside of the college classroom. And then the second educational principle was evaluation and transcripting should take into consideration learning outcomes, degree objectives, as well as really the end goal, the industry objectives, especially for our 2-year workforce programs. And a big component of that is within those learning objectives, what is valuable prior learning assessment and what is excess prior learning credit. So we didn't want to just give out 90 credits of elective coursework to students who went through the military, because that has financial aid implications. It doesn't get them any closer to a degree. And then the third educational principle is prior learning assessment should provide knowledge about the competencies, skills, habits of mind that a student has gained outside of the college environment. So there needs to be some form of proof that a student provides to the assessor that here is the knowledge, here's the skills, here's what I've gained through experience outside of the college class. And then we also have 3 assessment standards. And the first is that learning should be assessed in accordance with national state standards, as well as best practices. And we outline some of those best practices in a separate policy recommendation document that I'll touch on a little later. And then the second assessment standard is prior learning should be assessed through standardized testing, through ACE and credit recommendations, and then through faculty developed assessments such as challenge, portfolio, as well as workplace education training program credits. And then the third assessment standard is that the learning has to be college level and that the learning has to be evaluated by a faculty member, a subject matter expert. And so those were really the 6 standards that we had built. So that was definitely the infrastructure that we had in place. And then running concurrently with this Academy One pilot, we started to see institutions really leverage those principles. In Montana right now, the majority of our prior learning assessment is with AP and IB, which historically that hasn't changed. So adopting this prior learning assessment policy hasn't increased or decreased the numbers of AP and IB, but it has really increased the number of CLEP as well as the number of challenge exams that are awarded. And historically, we had always had CLEP exams, we'd always have challenge exams, but this was really some marketing material that was produced by our office as well as campuses to leverage the policy. But really utilizing those 6 principles and standards, we started to see some innovation, especially with workforce programs. One of our colleges developed in concert with the local union apprenticeship program that had prior learning credits built into it for inside wiremen and outside linemen. And so this is at one of our units that is a regional university that also has an embedded 2-year college. So a student who goes through this apprenticeship has their learning articulated to these college level energy technician programs, so that a student who completes that apprenticeship and is a journeyman has 29 credits available for an associate's degree, and all 29 of those credits are the technical credits. So the college level program is the curriculum mirrors the apprenticeship program. And so all a student needs to take is 31 credits of general education. They need to get their general education core out of the way for their associate's degree. If the student wishes to pursue a bachelor's degree, they then have up to 52 credits, so that 29 credits plus another 23, so 52 credits available for a bachelor's degree in energy. So we've seen really businesses really buy into that, where students can go through an apprenticeship and get prior learning assessment credits so that they're really dually credentialed. They have their journeyman's card as well as an associate's degree, and then there's also a management track through that bachelor's degree program to really leverage what a university setting can do for someone in the trades in terms of leadership building, in terms of management skills, and in terms of maturity. So that was a really exciting I guess, innovation that we created. And that really raised some questions about how many credits we really could award towards a degree. And so our accreditation body is Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities, NWCCU, and they have a cap of 25% of credits towards a degree can be awarded through prior learning assessment. And so when they saw that we were giving almost half of a degree through prior learning assessment, that's something that we wanted to raise to their attention, because their PLA cap wasn't well defined at that point, and we wanted some more guidance from them. And they came back and said, well, we're going to clarify our standards, that the 25% PLA cap, that is for experiential learning. So that's really kind of hands-on. If someone had been working as a paralegal, they can get up to 25% of a paralegal degree awarded through prior learning assessment. But we're also going to clarify experiential learning based credits. So that's college level work and learning that was acquired outside of the traditional classroom, but was still college level. And so that was falling under that 25% cap. And then they clarified a second route of instructional based credits. And that's credits that were a result of formal instruction, such as an apprenticeship. And so with formal instruction, those credits do not count towards that 25% cap. So a student, through that clarification, that was essentially an okay, an approval of awarding 29 credits towards an associate degree and 52 credits towards a bachelor's degree. And so with NWCCU really clarifying their standards, and they actually encouraged us to remove our own cap of 25% that was written in our policy. That really opened the door for a whole host of apprenticeship prior learning assessment opportunities. And so in March of 2017, we revised our PLA policy to reflect that change, that I guess those two different routes, that experiential learning based credits that fall under the 25% cap, and then instructional based credits that do not apply to that cap. And then recording that PLA credits, I said that I created a crosswalk. In Montana, all of our institutions submit their student information system data into a single statewide warehouse that I'm able to go in and tap. And so now we can go in and look semester by semester what students are receiving prior learning assessment credits, what courses they're receiving those in, as well as who's teaching those courses, what campuses, looking at best practices. And those PLA codes, we have different codes for CLEP, different codes for portfolio, so we can see statewide which model of PLA is gaining the most ground. That's something that we just built within the last 6 months. And now we have a dashboard using Tableau that's linked directly to that data source, so that users can go in and see with their own institution where their prior learning assessment credits are occurring. And so that dashboard isn't public, it's internal, but I can share a screenshot with you afterwards. And then we still have some issues of transcription with prior learning assessment credit, and it's touched briefly in our policy. But the transcripted credit needs to be transcripted the same way that other credits would be transcripted. So if a student is receiving prior learning assessment for RIT 101, it should be transcripted similar to as RIT 101. In Montana, we have a guaranteed transfer across our institutions, as well as common course numbering. And so we don't see as many of the PLA transfer issues within our own system, but students who choose to transfer out of Montana, um, we don't have any agreements outside of Montana for the articulation or for the transfer of PLA credits. So inside of our system, there is guaranteed transfer, but outside of our system, when those credits are transcripted, outside institutions may decide to not not recognize those as college level. So we have a couple different pilot programs. Right now we have within nursing, looking at specifically military veterans. We have a crosswalk of different medical medical service member jobs and what training occurred in order to get to that position, and then how can that articulate and how does that align to the nursing programs in our state. And so currently students who come in as maybe a retired medical corpsman, they're eligible for prior learning assessment credits within the actual nursing program. So once they're admitted to the nursing program, some of those program courses, they can receive credits through ACE articulation, as well as some really interesting prior learning assessment opportunities for people working in education. In Montana, we have a significant shortage of teachers, and we have a lot of place-bound teachers who aren't able to go back to school to receive, for example, master's level credits, graduate level credits to become higher level licensure. And so we have PLA opportunities online for paraeducationals as well as current teachers so that they can receive provisional licensure in one area, as well as up to 12 credits, both graduate and undergraduate credits in a content area, either towards a bachelor's degree. For example, if someone is a paraeducator and is working towards a bachelor's degree in education, up to 12 credits, as well as current teachers, if they want to become a master's teacher, up to 12 credits of graduate level coursework. So those are some of the highlights of our policy, a little bit of the roadmap of how we got there, and then really some of our more innovative use cases for our prior learning assessment.
Thank you, Eric. I had to mute my microphone when you were talking to prevent echoes, but I was like nodding and like I really wanted to let you know this is so helpful. And thanks for providing us with a holistic picture. You know, I appreciate you talking about in the beginning. It's not like a a smooth process when everybody agrees, right? But I think some of these discussions help to build a successful program right now, like the low utilization of the program in the beginning. And, we learn lessons from it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any silver bullet to sell the idea of PLA.
Yeah.
And I don't think that PLA is appropriate in every case. But I do think that if we're keeping the best interests of students in mind, there's a great number of students, especially adult students, returning veterans, incumbent workers, single parents, where recognizing their experience and their previous learning for prior learning assessment credits, that's the right thing to do. That's the ethical thing to do as educators. And so it's just the process of getting a policy in place that people agree upon, that's been thoroughly vetted by faculty members and hopefully written, or a large portion of it written by faculty members. And it also has some safeguards so that students aren't harmed by excess prior learning assessment credits, and institutions aren't harmed by a lack of rigor or just awarding credits without proper assessment.
Yeah, just think about like the money you're able to save for students in terms of tuition, and the sooner they get out of school, the sooner they can get a job, and the wage, the rate of return. Have you started to look at the data in terms of tuition saved and wage earned?
So because our policy is relatively new, adopted in 2015 and then revised in 2017, we have not. We have an initial cohort that we're tracking currently, as well as we have good baseline information for other students. We're part of the Complete College America Alliance, and so we track based on those metrics, as well as we have performance-based funding metrics in our state. So we have really robust tracking ability, as well as we're able to track students' wages through a partnership with our Montana Department of Labor and Industry, so we can match Social Security numbers to get wage records. And so that is something that we will be looking at. So probably starting for this spring 2018 graduating cohort at the two-year colleges, we'll be tracking students who received prior learning assessment credit during their academic career versus students who didn't, as well as a historic cohort that graduated in spring 2015. For our bachelor's degree students, as well as master's degree students, we have a little bit longer timeline. We'll probably be looking at the 6-year graduation rates of those students, as well as their wage outcomes. We have looked at retention rates, fall-to-fall retention rates of students who receive prior learning assessment credit last fall to the, I guess, fall 2016 to fall 2017. And for the returning or continuing student, that retention rate really wasn't impacted, but there was a slight increase of retention for first-time, full-time freshman students who receive prior learning assessment credits. So it is something that we're tracking. We just don't have enough time, hasn't lapsed since we passed policy to effectively measure yet, but we do have a plan to research and measure the impact.
Interesting. Well, if those records are ever going to be published in public, I'll be interested in, learning more about that.
Of course, and I'll be able to share those with you.
Thank you. Well, Erik, I really appreciate you joining us today, and I was just Googling the veteran population in Illinois, and we also have a large population, like you said, the adult students, and I appreciate you sharing about this, those very specific apprenticeship examples, and the accreditation issues and the transfer issues. It doesn't look like Illinois' PLA policy allows transfer. I could be wrong, but I think those assessment standards, in addition to everything else, will provide our Illinois colleagues with some institutional or even state level implications.
Great. Yeah, and please let me know if you have any questions, or if people who watch this webinar have any questions and would like to reach out. My email is erose@montana, montana.edu. So erose@montana.edu.
Okay, I have an email address. I'll share that with our colleagues.
Great.